mentalspod.com, advancing life science research, connecting people and ideas.
So you took a year off and wrote some poetry, and we have this ongoing kind of interest in science and art. Can scientists be artists?
Right, and so it's a question of the types of creativity needed. So, there's the sort of logical side of the brain, the left brain, right brain, and the creative side, the thinking outside the box side. And the great scientists use both, actually. So there's actually quite a parallel between creating art and creating science if it's really, really innovative and new. And so there's...
have you thought about the parallel?
Well, there's a great book out called Imagine How Creativity Works. So from a science perspective, we're actually understanding the brain and how people get creative. So there are times where you just need to focus and persist, drink a lot of coffee, work hard. And there's other times where it actually helps you not to be focused, to be like a little bit asleep.
Right.
And there's also things between in the collaborative space, just where different brains, how they can fight each other. If you're a little bit rude, it actually helps to get a little more creative thinking. So we're starting to understand that, and I think it's very interesting, both for making new art as well as new science. And so that's my 2 cents.
It takes that creativity for paradigm shifts. One similarity between the two is science has become so specialized, right? I mean, that's just the nature of it. But art has, in a way, too, like modern music, like it went atonal, and then it became, you sort of had to have training in it to understand it, right? And so in this century, we've seen both of them become very specialized.
It's interesting, and then a lot of times the real breakthroughs are when you rub two fields against each other, or you take an insight from one field and apply it to another, because everyone else, they've learned too much in a sense. And so it's kind of interesting. You need all this information, but you also need to be able to let go of the information. Otherwise, you won't come up with, the real insight.
Mm-hmm. And that can happen when you come in contact with another field, perhaps, is that you kind of let go of your own.
A lot of times that happens. So the example in the Imagine book he took was there was somebody who, because their life wasn't going that well, they started drinking, and they'd been working doing programming for an insurance company or some boring job. But they had a chemical engineering background, actually from my alma mater, Columbia. So he started making new drinks based on his knowledge of emulsions and oils and water. And so he got very creative on making,
like
as a bartender, mixed drinks, because he was coming out from the chemistry field. So he didn't know not to make something that mimicked like syrup and bacon in a drink. And he knew the oil, and
so he was sort of suspending his kind of native intelligence about drinks and going more with the scientific.
Yeah, just coming out from a science perspective, or what he thought would, because he didn't know any better. Like someone who'd been trained in mixology would never have done such a heretical thing.
And so,
so he wasn't afraid to break the rules because he didn't know what the rules were.
And what drink did he come up with?
Well, that was one of the famous first ones. He ended up making a whole bunch. It's real funny, but the one that I remember was. He said, sometimes at breakfast people like it when some syrup gets on their bacon. So he took the fat from the bacon and mixed that with some sweet syrupy flavor, but made it in alcoholic drink. And it actually took off and became the in vogue thing. Yeah, the thing that you think would sound gross and disgusting, but he didn't know any better, and he tried it, and after 20 tries, he got it so that it was a hit.
I mean, in the pharma industry, we see, I've heard of these buildings that are being built where people from different fields have to go past each other in the day.
Yeah, so Steve Jobs did this at Pixar, where he would put in all the programmers and the people doing the art, the cartoons, in the same building. And he even made the bathroom centrally located so people would have to bump into each other. In one of his New Yorker articles, he talks about, in the book he talks about Pixar. What's interesting about Pixar is every other studio, they have some hits and misses, but Pixar reproducibly makes hits, right? So they're doing something right in terms of how they organize the brains working together. But there's this famous, I think it's called Building 20, or in MIT, it might be a different number, but I think it's Building 20, where all sorts of different people in an open space were forced to collaborate with each other. And so they came up with new paradigms for understanding linguistics based on cognitive psychology or some other field that someone was working on, so they understood language at a meta level, at the brain level. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of what I'm interested in now is what's the extension to that for the ideas in science. So how can we force, and maybe this is worth recording, but if you are, how can we catalyze the right brains and the right ideas to come together? And if you can do that, that's huge.
I mean, does this just happen on its own anyway?
It does and it doesn't. There's actual reasons why there's certain levels of creativity in certain cities and certain environments. So
there are things we can do.
It's definitely, it's like anything else. There's some spontaneity to it, but there's definitely some underlying trends. And that's the fun part. There's also underlying trends to what changes things in the internet era, like with Wikipedia and Amazon, and things that work with technology, and there's things that work with people. And so I think with our field right now, it's poised for a big change if we can figure out how to get all those elements synergistic.
Going back to your studies in Eastern religion and thinking of comparative religious studies, I'm curious, as you look at the arc, of history through the 20th century and now into the 21st, it seems that science is getting a higher and higher place. Perhaps because people are turning more to that for the answers, even the big answers, right? Because science is kind of reliably coming up with them. I mean, maybe not the big answers, but a lot of data, a lot of theories. And art or religion is offering less or gets contradicted by science. And I just wonder if science is kind of causing a crisis for art.
I don't think so. I think what's interesting about the scientific method is that it works. If you can make something a testable hypothesis, you can develop evidence to support it. And then, maybe in later you'll disprove it, and then it changes. So it's not like there's Newtonian physics and then Einstein showed that it was different, right? Relativity. The interesting thing is that no matter how much we know, there's always more that we don't know. And so even with the expanding knowledge into realms, there's always going to be this sort of mysterious unknown, or where your intuition takes you. And I think that's why people still listen. Even though science may answer questions, it doesn't make music any less popular, because there's that part of us that just resonates with that thing which we can't even put our finger on. And maybe that's what the consciousness is, and the intelligence is always pushing to go beyond what you already know. Art does that in some ways more inspiringly than science, even though they're both creative endeavors.
But we do see, like if you look at universities, the humanities and the arts departments shrinking, underfunded, professors not getting tenure, being fired, and the science departments much more funded.
That's true, because there's the economic imperative. It's what, just like laws of nature, the laws of economics are unkind. They don't care. People just pay for whatever they're willing to pay for in a marketplace, and just like the laws of physics are there. I will say, this is going back to Steve Jobs' quote, one of the things he said he was good at was taking the humanitarians and the science and putting it together. So in some sort of ironic twist of fate, it's actually when you understand both areas that you can really do something. Because you have to understand people.
Yeah, I mean, with Pixar I see the art. With Apple, everybody tells me it's really artistic. I just don't get the art.
Well, the art is like, I'm not proselytizing them versus any other company, but there is a huge amount of art in the simplicity of making a device so that it's intuitive and good for the human brain. So we talked about music. They had to think about how to relay music in a way that works for people, right? And so that's sort of a combination of art and technology. Or we have this thing on with a web-based platform in the internet. It's actually a piece of art. The software is a piece of art. And if you go down at the release notes, you can look, it's like a gallery of images, but coming up with...
You mean the code, you mean...
I mean, it's a piece of art.
You mean the internet itself?
Well, the internet's a piece of art too. Combine, that comes up from like an ant colony from everybody's combined creative work. But every website is a piece of art. Right? And it's actually a very minimalistic piece of art. It has to fit in this little space, and there's certain rules and such. And some are going to resonate better with art critics or the mass humanity, and some will resonate less. So I think that actually it goes back to what we were saying about making something interesting. It has to have a piece of that. And so I think the challenge for the people in the humanitarians field is, how do you know enough about the technical fields to express your artistic nature in a commercially relevant way?
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
You want to be a
I mean, even
scientist
like
that relates to people, you have to understand enough about people.
Yeah, I mean, even like with music, the piano, right, was advanced more and more, like the technology. The piano is a technological wonder of its day.
Ray Kurzweil's electronic pianos to sound like a piano or like a trumpet. And,
Yeah, or
the
even just
technology
back in the
influences the art.
18th century. I mean, the music grew as the piano was developed.
Mm-hmm.
And it took that technology.
Right. And that's the interest, to me, evolution is the mix of the art and the science, because each influences each other, right? So the technology, the tools that you have, if you will, influence the art. And the artistic, the new ideas you have influence the technology. So I think we just need a new way of thinking about careers for people, where you take what inspires you, but you take what's practical, and then you synthesize the two together. Then you can kind of make your own career. The extent to which you become, obviously, how good you are and how hard you work at it matters. But there's going to be some jobs which require, a little bit of the artist and a little bit of the scientist together, or the technologist. And